live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Thanks for joining us today. Happy Wednesday to all of you. See, we've got a nice group already in. This is great. More than a dozen folks have joined us on the live side of things. Toddy is here. Kim, Rick, Christiana, April, Leo. Got a special shout out from Jack already. Kat, Darcy, Elizabeth, Julia, Kristen, Ellen, Cy, Aaron. Thanks for joining us this morning. So we are talking with Jack Pierce about something that he calls extreme learning design or behavior design. And Jack and I have been talking for a while now. In fact, you had actually been on the broadcast in the past. And since then, you're kind of an active member of the Slack group. You're regularly in there posting. And we've talked about your goals with things like behavior design and kind of the goals of TLDC. And it's interesting because it seems like every time we talk, some of the common themes that come up are like trust and respect and just having a better workplace, all these different things. And I'm really fascinated because when you had pitched me this idea of talking about behavior design, I started thinking about, okay, wait a minute. So instructional design, you know, everything that we build has to have some level of design. And so behavior design makes sense. But how does that relate to building trust and building respect and things like that? So I am really, really fascinated to hear what you have to say about this topic. And pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin you to the screen so that you're going to have the big screen and I'm going to be like little on the side, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then let's talk about your topic. And then if any questions and stuff come up, I'll just I'll jump in and call you out.
Cool. All right. And when I get to a point where I want to do a little screen share, you'll help me with that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really easy to do. So just let me know when you're ready to do that.
Okay, cool. So my name is Jack Pierce, and I'm living just outside Minneapolis. And I've been in and around design, honestly, since 1970. I almost grimace when I say that, but you know what? I've gotten so much experience, and it's improved my life so much that I don't mind admitting to that either. I've done design where there's hard output like architecture, photography, graphics, even copywriting, software design. I've done a lot of different kinds of design. And then the softer designs, which I've been doing for a good 30 years. I think I'll stop bracketing myself in time here, but with training, learning, and development design. And I call that soft design because there is no, sure, there may be training content, but there's no real hard output like a building that people just walk through and they can't really do anything to it except they interact with it a bit. But with TLD, it's it's left up to each person and their team, their environment, their culture that they're in. And because of that, so much can go wrong. I can't believe anybody, and I'm a little bit thirsty here. It's beer for me, it's Monster. I can't believe anybody out there hasn't had the experience of doing some kind of course or even curriculum or anything that's training and learning oriented and hasn't been really disappointed with the results. And the more that happened to me, the more I got into analysis of that. And I think partly what's happened to me with being in so many different kinds of design is where I used to think of design as just sort of simple problem solving. That's a very narrow focus on it. And what I've come to love about design for me is that it's really what's the word I want? It's Shoot. It's the synthesis is the word I wanted. And synthesis, I mean, you can think of photosynthesis where sunlight and whatever that green stuff is makes plants grow. And that's, that's two elements coming together to make something different altogether. And that's the broader focus that I think of and that I speak of when I speak about design. It's, what are all the pieces? What are their context? Especially if there is a problem to solve or something to create, is, like take it all apart, see what all the parts are. And unlike putting a clock back together, there are parts you want to throw out almost always. So it's put it back together better. And the synthesis part is that whole, not what you'd expect. Where's the creative leap that makes this be more than it could have been, more than just a job you finished. And so, when I look at all of the feelings and emotions that people go through, and let's face it, we're not all really great with our feelings and emotions. Sometimes they take us away. They are they can be confusing and threatening and create lots of anger, sometimes shame. But that's what happens to whatever learning product or training product you create too, is you're giving it over to people who have those complex emotions, and those complex emotions are multiplied when you start to put them in their context of their team or the people around them. And so I started into a long process that was, well, okay, so if it's people's behavior that makes things work, it's the do step of anything. So give them your training, your course, your whatever, and then they have to do, right? Well, sometimes they don't do. It's not that they can't do, but they sort of refuse to. And I started thinking, well, I have to design for that. How do it's one thing to give them a great product, but how do I make them want to use it? How do I make them see the value in it for them? And how do I make it safe for them to try something new, especially amongst people who may or may not be critical or short with them? And I have to give a shout out here to Leo Rickardson, who I know is on. Leo spent an ungodly amount of hours with me working on this over the years. And it started out, he was one of my favorite instructional designers, great writer. And we just had this nice professional relationship. But when I got into wanting to think, okay, how do I get it to their hands so that they'll use it and all my work isn't for naught? Leo was a tremendous help. He kicked me upside the head more than once and really took me to task to make sure I could explain the things that were in here or in my gut. And so that's where we started. And eventually, I think the huge benefit isn't just in seeing your work really get used and seeing it make a difference, but the same elements that get people to trust what you do, believe in what you do, put what you do to work, are also the same elements that you can use on your own for self-development, or the team can use for team development. And so it's all about, behavior is all about human nature. And when you think about it, there's a ton we don't know about human nature. Like, where do your feelings come from? Where do emotions come from? What's the difference between a feeling and an emotion? And the reason that's important is you want the emotional framework of a learner to be open to you and trust you so that they will take your stuff in. And yeah, they may be in another part of the world, but the cool thing is people are people, and they respond to the same rules of human nature as everybody else. Can you completely, control that issue or that problem on the other end? No, but you can set it up right. And the more you do with a group or a company, the more you can accomplish that, because the way that you learn to design for behavioral outcome is something that they're going to pick up as well. And I don't mean like by osmosis. It's something that that for any team to develop to be a strong, vital, productive team, they need these concepts, and they're not difficult, but they're just sort of hidden in order to become, to reach their potential, both as a group and groups within groups around the organization. Everything aggregates and kind of floats up. And that's talking about culture is a whole nother thing, but it's really no different. We may come back to that for just a tiny bit later, but so I really have come to believe that inside of every problem you need to solve professionally, with your family, I know it from growing up kids, this whole notion of a broader look at design and what makes people do what they do, it always falls in place, because there's always behaviors and feelings and emotions between the content you give and the behavior that happens. So now I'd like to jump to those. I don't have much for slides, but I think they'll all, they should hit you as sort of like, duh. So how do we set up my screen here?
Sure. So Jack, go ahead, and if you mouse over your screen and then you go to the top of the screen, you can kind of see a little computer with a little arrow button in there. There you go. And then that can share your screen.
Yep. Okay.
Got it.
Screen one, share. All right. Go back here and put this, whoops, not at the bottom, at the top. Okay, put this into play. So this is kind of the notion of, we're always here, right? Wherever here is, and we always want to get to there. And every time we get there, there's another there. And so, so the question is, where's your trajectory going? Where would you rather be than where you are? And not tomorrow, but sort of longer term. And what that really turns out to be not only is to make more effective courses or be more effective in arguments or convincing clients to do things your way. But it's really about the drive, the human drive that everybody has, and that's to be who they want, achieve what they want, and feel how they want doing it. So, everybody is internally, that machinery is always going around, and if you step in front of that, or you throw a 2x4 in it and kind of clog up the gears, then people are not going to be very happy. And we spend a lot of our time being not very happy. So let's start with why get into behaviors here. And it's because behaviors are what get things done. It's not, we sometimes we get as far as pushing new knowledge at people and thinking we're done. And sometimes that's all the client wants. But there's a long history of experiments going back at least 30 years, where people are asked what it is that they really have learned well, and then how did you learn it? And it turns out that it's learning by doing. So it's the do step, and this is a really good example. It's kind of a fun example. Quite some time ago, Michelin was a huge client. Leo did a lot of work with them as well. I mean, we had a whole team that this was our sort of our major client, or at least early days. But the assignment for me was to write, actually it was 2 courses on the physics of high-speed driving. Okay, so I'm a dry well on that. So what do? Well, it's what you always do. You do your needs assessment, figure out what direction you've got to take, and then you've got to go find the experts, and tap their brains. And as you synthesize that knowledge and decide how you're going to put it onto screen for them so that it makes sense, you've got your knowledge transferred down. But I'm guessing nobody here has driven a race car before, but just ask yourself, could you go out on the track and do this after you've seen a couple of courses? Not without great trepidation, I'm sure. So, the do step, or the how, gets to behavior change. And there's no way to learn driving on a track without driving on a track. So you strap yourself in, you put your helmet on, you you spin off the track, you leave skid marks, but eventually, you're more and more in control. And I went from not knowing anything to writing the courses to help me here, but I bought a car. And when you're around all those BF Goodrich and Michelin people and you're going to events with them and races, you just kind of fall into it. But my first year out on the track, I was Rookie of the Year in the local Porsche club and had a ball. It's one of the couple of things I look back on and say, that was always fun, but it's got to get to the do step. And in fact, in our Connect platform, it's an agile. I don't want to go here long, but it's an agile design and collaboration platform with 4 major steps. The last step is always learn what works. So it's take your solution and go put it into play immediately, live. Let's say it's customer service stuff. You're going to take to that department and those reps, and you're gonna actually get immediate feedback on what works and what doesn't, and bring it back into the design step. Because the whole iterative nature of agile design, that's the way you quickly improve. And there's lots of designers doing that in learning, having an agile approach to it. So, but with all of the behavioral things that impact how people use what we do, it's everything is really controlled and driven by certain laws of human nature, things that we aren't really very familiar with, or maybe not at all. But human nature is what drives behavior. So we have a number of what we call natural laws, and what happens in physics laws, right? If you step off a cliff, you don't have to wonder about that very long. But what if you step off the cliff with a person? What if you really bash the trust they have in you? And what are they going to do? What's the result going to be? And there's going to be a relationship crash. It may not make a lot of noise, but it will show itself eventually. It's like an action reaction, just like Newton's laws. So it really, a maxim you have to accept is that human nature is always part of human performance. It just is. And that's why you have to, if you really want to solve the problems, underneath every learning problem, there is a human problem. And it needs to be something that you design for in a parallel nature, so that they both parts of the solution come up together. So then we want to talk about how prevalent relationships are. And if you haven't thought of them as being the context of your life, they really are. I mean, whether you're talking social or family or work, everything happens out of relationships. And human nature governs how relationships go. This is one of our natural laws we call fair trade, and simply says, it's the only kind of trade that people are attracted to. And this sounds a little like Stitch in Time Stage 9, a kind of a homily, but if you talk to a sociologist, they call it reciprocity, and reciprocity exists in every culture on the planet. So it really is one of the laws of human nature. The thing about fair trade is that when people are left on the short end of an unfair trade, whether they think about it or not, it's natural, it's human nature to act in a way that makes things fair again. So if somebody damages your trust, they take your trust away, what do you take away from them? Well, probably cooperation. So, that's another reason why you can train somebody, but you can't make them do it. You don't necessarily get the results, even if they learned it, because, they get to a point where they feel vulnerable and they don't want to stick their neck out. So it's not necessarily vindictive. It's also, it's just a human nature to protect yourself. So when you get into this realm, we experience life through our emotions, and feelings and emotions really are the currency of relationships. Some of you may have heard the concept of an emotional bank account, and we track, again, human nature. You may not know this or think about it consciously, but you're doing it. Everybody you deal with has a kind of a place in the ledger, where, well, they've been contributing a lot, or they always give me the short end of the stick. So, it's really true here, and this is a very primitive, primal level. The emotion of trust is what makes things really move forward or not. It's the level of trust in a relationship really determines the output of the relationship, because if we don't trust, we feel vulnerable. Or if you want to think of it this way, it's trust versus fear. And as a matter of scientific fact, your brain, thousands of times a day, maybe even hundreds of times in a single meeting, will go through, can I trust that? Is that safe? Should I be afraid of that? Should I hang back? Can I move forward? Your brain's always doing that because it's a way to protect you and help you get forward. It's just, again, if you don't think about it or don't know it's there, it doesn't matter. It's there. So, and I just love this quote. It doesn't matter what context you're talking about. With trust, we thrive. And without trust, we just don't. So this is a 2012 quote. You can look up trust in business or trust in family or trust in relationships, and you can find quotes like this from, decades old and up to yesterday. It's just a very common theme that people are aware of. But as aware as we might be on that, there's a real problem with having human nature control things and having feelings and emotions be the currency, because most of us really don't understand feelings and emotions very well. And even the people who think they're people savvy can't tell you the difference between a feeling and an emotion in most cases. And so what we've got here is a problem where, and this is just a nugget to hold on to, because there's so many more pieces, but emotions come from your self-conscious. And there's only, depends who you talk to, 6 to 12 real emotions. Everything else is a feeling. But your subconscious protects you by just like idiot lights on your dashboard. It says, oh, that's a fear. Oh, that's happy. That's sad. You can trust that or not. So it's giving those signals over to you at the subconscious is a primitive part of your brain. It works about 1,000 times faster than your cognitive brain, which means it's going too fast to think. It doesn't literally. It's giving you all these emotional signals without thinking. So it's something that you are never in control of. I don't care how much you know, how much you've studied. Emotions are going to trigger off on their own no matter what. And they do it so fast. It's one of the reasons it can be scary. And our somewhere in the subconscious, then we flip those over to, oh, what's that feeling? And partly that is, how big a impact you think that has. People react to the same things in different ways and at different levels. So, sometimes you're not even aware that somebody else is feeling much more vulnerable or damaged or reluctant than you are, because they've got a different set of beliefs. And just a quick nugget, we won't go any farther on unless there's questions. Your emotions are what start feelings. But in between the emotion and the feeling, you've got a set of personal beliefs, and your emotions get filtered through those beliefs so that you get to that feeling that's many shades of gray different than it could be for somebody else. But it's the only place you can change behavior is in changing beliefs. So I believe you're trustworthy. I trust you more. I don't feel as vulnerable. I'm going to stick my neck out more. But if I don't believe you're trustworthy, I believe you make me vulnerable, then that's a whole different path. So here's just those 5 statements. It's behaviors, not knowledge, that get things done. Human nature is the unseen force behind all behavior. Relationships and those behaviors in relationships are the context of our lives. Feelings and emotions are the currency of relationships. And unfortunately, most of us don't fully understand our feelings and emotions. So, this is why organizations have a chronic, perennial loss of talented personnel. It's why they don't get engagement from people. It's why they don't have productivity, because all of these things we don't fully understand are always at play, and they're always kind of rocking our boat. So they keep us from settling in, feeling safe, and simply doing what we want to do. Well, that's my end. So let's see. I bet if
real quick, I'm gonna jump in here real quick. I want you to keep that slide on for a second, because this slide is really, really good. I love these points that you make out here, but I wanted to read off a couple things that I saw in chat that that I think are really poignant. Kim was saying, I agree with all of this. How could one not? It also makes me wonder if this is part of why companies seemingly want to replace human workers with robots, AI, etc.
Yes. Yeah, people are unpredictable, their work. And if I have to understand their feelings, then I have to face my feelings. And I don't want to do that because it's scary.
Yeah, totally. And Sarah had a good point here. I see this trust issue in a lot of safety training. People are penalized, punished when they get things wrong, makes them afraid to try. Need to build trust early and provide a safe place for them to fail, debrief, learning before going out in the real world where
Exactly
could have catastrophic results.
Yeah, great. That whole safe practice idea is worth, even in sales training. I used it tons. It's really important.
So I want to ask you about human nature, and just, one thing that popped into my head was sort of if human nature is something that's dynamic or if it's static.
Oh,
Does it
good
change,
question.
or does it remain constant?
The laws of human nature, and you can see these anecdotally, but there's also real good science behind them. They don't change. They never change. But how it impacts us does change because of our changing beliefs.
Yeah, yeah. Because in my head, I'm also thinking about cultural differences, not like culture in the workplace, even though that could be applied, but also different cultures. Just as somebody who may have been raised a little differently from others, just sort of the nature of how I perceive things, and even my own behaviors can be different from others in certain ways, and then I shift and
Absolutely. Where were
right.
you? Where were you brought up?
Well, I grew up in Oxnard, California, which is in
Well, that's a
Ventura
different
County.
culture.
Yeah, so that's a foreign country. No, it's not that different, but I know it. Both my parents. Well, actually, my dad was born here. My mom was born in the Philippines, but I was
Yeah.
definitely raised Filipino.
Yeah. When you were talking different cultures, I was thinking, at first I thought Asian because that's typically there's a real hard division or hard transition between there and here. But
Right.
the first thing that actually really popped into my head was the Philippines because it's different, but it's not different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, we've been colonized so much. Sam has a great point here too. This is great stuff, but it is still all driving towards conscious behaviors. Aren't most of the behaviors that we can measure about each other driven by something less than our conscious awareness, that human nature part? It's totally manipulable by way of perception.
good points. And because we're not, because we're stupid, we're ignorant about how human nature works. Yeah, it's behind the scenes, and you can use it to manipulate. But the point is that everybody needs to understand. I mean, just to apply, and I'll go back to customer service again. Just to apply new thinking and new routines or scripts or whatever to customer service, those customer service people need to understand human nature and what will make the person on the other end of the phone, because I'm thinking, service reps that way. How do you treat them to diffuse anger, to get them to trust you? And actually, we did that once. We didn't go full bore into helping people understand human nature, but one of the things we did in their scripts was we never let them ask a question for which the answer would be no, because there's a chemical difference between the thought of no and the thought of yes. And when they applied that to scripts and how they treated people, it was a huge difference. In fact, there was some other things that went on with that, but and as it happens, Leo was a key part of that learning. The seasonal people, the 300 seasonal customer service reps that came in, that we gave that sort of leg up on human nature, they got a level of 12 times the kudos, meaning I want to talk to your supervisor and tell him you did a great job, than the regular legacy employees. So you don't have to be deep in it, but if you want somebody to be able to think on the fly and solve problems on the fly that have human-centered solutions, then you teach them a bit about behavior. And it's really the hard part, and I like the write-up that was promoting this. The hard part is learning to see and feel your own feelings and understand where they came from. It's scary at first, but by the time you understand it, you go, oh, well, okay, I can dribble that ball. I can do whatever it is because I'm misrepresenting or misspeaking. I can do basic behavior design. I can get people to feel open and trusting and not be vulnerable so that we can have a better relationship. And that's really what it is let's make better relationships. And the way we look at it is relationships that are anchored in trust.
Nice. Excellent. Hey, Jack, is it okay if I jump into some of the questions here that are in the Ask a Question area? Darcy's got one that's the most upvoted, which is, what tactics would you suggest for convincing leaders to invest in behavior change designs?
Oh, yeah. You and I talked about that really quickly before. I said bludgeon them. But, okay. Truthfully, it kind of depends on who they are and if they trust you, if they are people that are defensive and feel vulnerable most of the time anyway. And you can learn to sort of read where they're at emotionally, and some people you won't get there, but I think like somebody mentioned in one of the comments, this is easy stuff to believe. And so, what I say is the human component of the learning or training, whatever facet you're in, really is what determines its success. And that human component is totally measured by trust. And if you give them this example, I think that becomes pretty obvious. When we feel like we're doubting that this situation is safe or we don't trust, we quickly become turtles. We won't stick our necks out. We retract into our shells where it's safer. And then when it comes time to apply this new knowledge or do work together, how difficult is that? We're all sort of protected and we've got this safe space that's between us. It's not productive. And if they can recognize that kind of behavior in people, they aren't willing to push out and give this a try. And it's not that hard. I don't know why. And if they are a dysfunctional sort of manager, you're really you may not get there with them, but if you can get them to understand that human nature is the transmission, if you will, between the engine, the work that you're doing, and the results, the tires turning on the road, that human nature and trust, it totally regulates how successful you're going to be. And so, do you want to spend all this money and only be partially successful? Probably not. And it may be that you need to set up a kind of a test to show them. And it doesn't have to be something that's, flies off the wall at them and is really overtly different. It's just that you can show them what you're building in here, and then you can see how the results come out compared to other things. To get into it any more than that, we'd have to sit down and talk about the company, the culture, the people. And by the way, I'd totally be willing to do that if you want. But it's an issue where maybe the best way to get into it is do it unbeknownst to them, get some good measurements, and hopefully they're better measurements than they've gotten before, and tell them here's the reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, sort of tongue in cheek, Avi was saying up here, but you can use perception framing techniques to present it to leadership, which is, that's pretty funny.
Well, manage or manipulate. I mean, you can take your pick of how you're thinking about it, but if you're just going for the best results, I don't care what you call it.
Yeah. Yeah. And along the same lines, Lisa had mentioned here in the Q&A as well, she's saying, I love this concept of fair trade and reciprocity, but how do you address the inevitable response of many executive leaders? Life isn't fair.
You know, I hate to say it like this, but there's three different kinds of leaders. And the guy that helped me develop this, besides Leo, unfortunately, he's not too well right at the moment, but he is a C-suite veteran. And positions like the global chief human resources officer at LG Electronics. That's the kind of pedigree he has. And, he's pretty fed up with some of the executives. And so there's the ones that still think, after all these years, all the discussion, that you shouldn't have feelings and emotions at work, and like children should be seen and not heard. But that one point that you can't take human nature out of human performance is another one to drop on people, that they, what can they do? You either manage it or you don't manage it. And something not managed is not good. So, but then there's the on the other end of the spectrum, there are the more enlightened CEOs or CHROs or whatever it is, VP of HR, that get it and they're willing to try for it. And that's becoming more common. I think the bell curve in the middle, though, is the interesting place to attack, because there's a lot of people that will talk the talk. They have no idea how to walk the walk. And if you can show them how to walk the walk, they're already heading that direction. I think that's a group that might be 50% of executives. So, and public companies are worse. The larger the company, the more difficult it can be. There's a lot of factors.
Right.
But if they want to talk, if they want to talk bottom line, and that feelings aren't involved in bottom line, ask them how they're doing on talent retention. Ask them how they're doing on productivity and engagement, and how many years have they been at it, and how many millions of dollars or whatever figure is the right level for their company have they spent, and they haven't moved it at all. So, what aren't they doing? Well, they aren't taking care of the human component, the human nature that is always there. I used to say for sales that before we trade money, we trade trust. And any person who's been involved in sales knows relationship selling is the most productive selling, and it does involve creating that relationship of trust. Well, that's not just in selling. We're selling ourselves all the time. Everybody is. Who's the author that gets right behind that big time? I can't think, but we are all trying to influence somebody to do something better or different all the time, or do it with me better and different. Let's hook ourselves to the same wagon, and two of us pulling's got to be better. It's all about relationships, and that's all about trust. And maybe if you know the company, there's an initiative that you're aware of that probably didn't go as well as everybody wanted. And I'll bet you anything, you can trace that back down to relationships and trust. Mm-hmm. Even policies that get put in place, the ones that say, we don't trust you, so we're going to control you. Oh, that's a huge insult and blow to trust. So it isn't always overt actions. It's, how we're making everybody act is also involved there.
Interesting. Very cool. I can't help but think about like the concepts of human nature and of trust, and just change and fear, and how all of it is actually translating into this world that we live in now, where, here we are, this group of people like within this digital format, and how the impact of that is affecting, say, our perception of human nature just because we're all just staring at screens. We're not even like in front of each other face to face, but then there's that digital element in there that is also kind of affecting things nowadays, especially. So it really is a lot to think about. Can I read you? I just want to read a couple things from chat too, because I love some of these comments that have been coming through. First of all, Kim was talking about a book. Where was it? I'm wondering if Jack has ever read the book, which I mention all the time. The Shift, How Seeing People as Everything. Oh, how seeing people as people changes everything.
No, I don't know that. It sounds great though.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out. And people are,
was that one I wrote a chapter in? I'm not sure. No, I did. I'm glad to have that one brought up. I will take a look at it.
Nice. And then Darcy, just sort of following up on you answering his question. He says, I think I see what you're saying. Assemble your team of believers, those with whom you've built trust, and focus on those leaders for support. Also, providing a specific example of a behavior design that was successful in order to help them see the issue/challenge through the lens of behavior change instead of just a knowledge lens.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is so much that can come out of I appreciate comments back and forth, but if we're really discussing, we get way deep into some things that turn the lights on.
Definitely. Let's see. I'm just going through here. Now I got one more question, and then we'll start to get ready to wrap it up here. And this one is from Julia. Julia is asking, would you open a training event with a statement of purpose that nods to the potential for distraction outside the lab? If so, what would you do to encourage participants to put their troubles on the coat rack and enter the space entirely present? Oh, that's cool. How would you make it plain to participants that not only is it okay to make mistakes in a training lab, but expected and a healthy part of the learning process?
Right. Well, a couple of things. You get direction and content, right, to take in there so that you can be effective. But the real learning, I'll have to think where those studies came from. They came through the Center for Creative Leadership, but it was a guy that we've talked to over in London. Anyway, the whole idea that you learn how to do something much better if you actually can try it, like riding a bicycle, swimming. I mean, there's lots of examples, but the other piece of that is that, especially if they're in the lab with other people who are also training and learning, more important and more valuable than the content they got going in is the content that they develop as they are experiencing things and being mindful of how those things came to be through the exercise that they wouldn't have known otherwise. And if they can discuss those with other people having the same kind of experiences, then the content that they develop there in the lab is really more important than the content they got before coming into the lab. It's the learning value really does depend on them, and even the feedback that they give can add to other people's knowledge before they come in. It's a real sort of responsibility to be a contributor in your own learning. If you're half there, what things do we want to do halfway? We don't want to drive a car halfway. If we don't want to do our special relationships halfway, it's a period of time when they can multiply their competence. And if you want to go back to you'll only get out of it what you put into it, that's still the truth. But I think it's a little more powerful to talk about the new content, the new learning that can only come from their interaction. If that really depends on them, especially if they're talking with other people. And then everybody's contributing to everybody else. And it's a really sort of a sacred sacred responsibility. By the way, that's exactly what we'll do in a mastermind session that is coming up soon.
Nice segue to that. Let me paste that URL in there. This is Jack has been discussing this stuff with me for like months, just sort of like, and he's been building this thing, and it's been fascinating to watch, fascinating to have the conversations with him about it. I think that for me, like, trust has always been a really big thing for me, especially when I'm trying to support TLDC. It's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of ads, and I really don't monetize the community much, and it's because I'm just looking for authenticity, and I love just having people feel safe about sharing content and contributing to the conversations like we have here. I mean, I really wish that I could hear everybody's take on this stuff, because it is really, really relevant for me, the ideas of trust within the world we live in now. So having these conversations with Jack are always helpful, and he's got this mastermind that he's going to be hosting soon. And so take a look at that link there. He'll be discussing behavioral design. And go ahead, Jack, you can pitch this thing if you'd like.
Sure. It's culmination of a lot of things I've done before, so it's not new, but it's new in this format. And I'm really looking for people who are really serious about how they view design and how they implement design to come in and go through these collaborations with me and learn the why of behavior design and the what and the how. It's these small groups of 8, of which I'm one of the 8. And it's a couple hours, so we'll have time to really sit together and learn who we are as a team, learn who we are as designers, take on that responsibility of creating new content together. And so we'll start with some new knowledge, and then we'll go into a collaboration to solve the human part of a problem and see exactly how it works. So it's, and we'll do that a couple of times in 2 hours. It should be a lot of good discussion. It will be a really good use of the Connect platform, which for instructional design or learning design, we can use that same agile framework for each different phase of creating the product, whether it's needs assessment or it's getting the business case nailed down with whoever is the owner, or it's getting all of the SMEs and other people aligned to one purpose. There's a lot of fast things we can do in the collaborations that get us to a higher quality solution faster. And whatever the subject is, we'll be building in that whole human behavior trust equation in whatever the solution is. It's going to contain something that furthers our relationship with others, and further the relationship you have with your clients as well.
Cool. So you guys check out that link that I posted in chat, and Jack is going to be around. I'll repost it. I'll put it in the newsletter, and just get it out there. It'll be linked in the description in the podcast, and then the video posts for this one. And that's it. Jack, thank you so much for
skywriting. Are you going to do the skywriting thing we talked about?
The skywriting thing?
Yeah, the plane.
What?
The plane that advertises the mastermind.
Oh. Yeah, I went ahead and it only cost a few $1,000s. We're going to go ahead and just buy that across California. Let's see. So I just want to add a couple things. One, Friday, I actually have another guest coming in. It's sort of like a pre-community day episode where we're talking with Teresa Franco Macaro about story. I didn't get to post it in the newsletter. We kind of booked this one a little late, but Friday there is going to be like a pre-community day conversation about story with another great story focused instructional designer. So join us for that on Friday. And then of course, next week, don't forget community day is happening. If you guys want to host a networking table, hit me up. If you want a free expo booth, hit me up. In fact, I'm just let you guys in on it. If you want like to get into community day for free, just host a booth or host a table and you'll get in. So yeah, that's it. I'm really looking forward to next week. It's going to be a lot of fun and the program looks great. And with that, we'll just wrap it up. Jack, thanks again.
And I have to do a shout out to Toddy Norum, who just signed up.
Oh, of course, Toddy's great. Oh, in fact, I want to end with something that Toddy said. Wait, where was it? Toddy said, part of creating trust is about creating value as well. And
yes,
I'm happy to end the broadcast.
Anita and Eleanor in.
There you go. Well,
cool.
Excellent. All right, you guys. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Friday, hopefully. Have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.
Really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jack. See ya.